Hola a todos los que se conectan. Vamos a hacer la presentación en inglés. Entonces, ya nos estamos conectando, ya está aumentando el número. Y bueno, empecemos. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Santiago Borda. I'm the president of the Chevening Alumni Association. Dear alumni, participants, and panelists, welcome to the third Chevening Alumni Program Fun webinar series organized by the Chevening Carlos Reyes and supported by the Chevening Alumni Colombia. For those of you that do not know what Chevening is the UK government global scholarship program that offers future leaders the unique opportunity to study a master's degree in the UK. As I said, I'm the president of the Chevening Alumni Colombia, and this is the former and current Colombian Scholar Association, and we gather to promote friendship and business relations between our members. But our association goes farther than that. We are the gathering place for our alumni initiatives. By their very nature, all Chevening alumni are national leaders, and many of them are also social entrepreneurs. For that reason, the Alumni Association is the best place to catapult many of the alumni initiatives. In this COVID context, this means that we need to find in our network the support we require to overcome the challenges this pandemic has placed on all of us. Today, we're going to see different views of how pandemic has affected our economy, but we will have the opportunity to think in options on how to overcome them. We will need much help from our peers, not only because this pandemic has placed us under stress, but we also must think of the challenges that climate change brings upon us. The recent natural and human tragedy brought by Iota hurricane is one of the many examples. Finally, I would like to transmit a message from Camila Pantoja. Camila is a Colombian Chevener. She's a medical worker, and she has been twice affected by COVID. She wanted to be here, but she's still feeling short of breath, and she doesn't feel well enough to talk with us. Today, she asked me an important question. When will this post-pandemic scenario happen? And I think she rightly thinks that we should not forget that the COVID threat is still out there and is very present. This, of course, poses a great challenge: how to reactivate our economy while still taking care of ourselves. I truly think that the best way to solve this is by asking for help and helping others. We have a great opportunity to achieve great things, but it is only possible if we work together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating, and welcome to this webinar.
Thank you, Santiago, and thank you all for joining us for today's post-pandemic series. As has pointed and Camila Pantoja has mentioned, this is not, we're not advocating for that we are living already in a post-pandemic world, but we need to start already learning about what is happening to our cities, economies, understand how we may move forward when we are able to move forward from this pandemic. This is a series of webinars that has been exploring ways in which the current pandemic is affecting our cities and how we may plan for recovery and strengthen our resilience to future crises or threats. In this session, we will discuss some of the impacted economic sectors in cities. We're narrowing our focus to creative, cultural, and service industries. These industries have been profoundly affected in Colombia and in many other countries in the world throughout this pandemic. We want to learn about what have been the main vulnerabilities of these industries and how we may move forward to recover and strengthen them as they play a role in a post-pandemic economic and social recovery. In order to do so, we have invited international and local experts to give us a perspective about these challenges. This will be a space to explore and understand rather than to give definite answers. I would invite you to seek to connect after this event, as the road to recovery will be long and we will all need to participate. We have conceived these conversations with groups of people involved with ideas or initiatives that have targeted or the identified challenges. This is why we have designed these participation spaces in accordance with the following principles. We want to promote active participation from our speakers and attendees. We invite you to speak from evidence and practice, and we value everybody's contribution. Now, to start with today's event, I invite to the chat to do a chat check-in. Please use the chat to tell us where you are, what is your background, and what is your main concern about creative and or service industries and the recovery in a post-pandemic. Our host for today's speaking event Forero, specialist in technology and manufacturing sectors. He has led teams in research, industrial, and economy analysis with demonstrated achievements in international affairs industry. Welcome, and please help me introduce our speaker panel.
Thank you, Carlos, for the introduction and the invitation to take part of this event. As Carlos mentioned, we will look into international and national good practices under the COVID-19 pandemic and how we can turn this crisis into opportunities. Good morning and good afternoon to all our guests and panelists. My name is Enrique Forero, and I will be serving as your moderator. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this online conversation. Please take into account that this is an opportunity to join professionals who want to make an impact on our society. No matter our role or professional background, we are key players in shaping and making a contribution to improve the economy and local communities. This conversation will focus on how the pandemic has impacted certain economic sectors, services, tourism, and creative industries, and how we can revitalize them in the post-pandemic and prepare for future shocks. To all the participants from across the world and Colombia, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. You can be sure that the speaker, the panelists, and myself will do the best so you can get the most out of this session. To the speaker, Elena, and all the panelists, thank you very much in advance for what I'm sure will be a remarkably interesting and very engaging conversation. Let me tell you how the event will be structured. The first part will be a presentation for our international speaker, Elena. She will have 15 minutes after this presentation. The conversation will begin and will guide the discussion. I invite you all to make the discussion interactive by submitting your question. You could use the chat box function and indicate who the question is for. We will make a poll to select the top ranked questions. The webinar will be end at 6 p.m. British time, 1 p.m. Colombian time. In terms of introductions of our panelists, we will not go through the full biographies. You can find those on the event's invitation. However, let me introduce briefly to you our special guest. Today, we will begin with a presentation by Elena. Elena holds a vast amount of professional experience in culture and philanthropy. She was leading programs related to the access to employment, entrepreneurship, and cultural integration of refugees and migrants in Greece. She has worked on research for the development of deprivated urban areas with multicultural characteristics located in the center of Athens, focuses on the potential of cultural venues, open space, and entrepreneurship. Since 2019, she is the advisor on culture to the Prime Minister of Greece. After Elena's presentations, we will open a conversation with local experts in related industries, creative, cultural, tourism, social, and services sector. So our experts include Luisa Romero. Luisa is a social entrepreneur with a strong commitment to sustainable development and peace. She's an expert in international tourism administration. Luisa co-founded Get Up and Go Colombia, an NGO from Cauca that promotes sustainable tourism in areas affected by the armed conflict. Our next expert is Norma. Norma is the founder of the environmental film festival Planet On, an event aiming to communicate the environmental issues through films to educate and raise awareness in Colombia. Norma's expertise is on international film business. She is now leading a research about parameters of adopting of sustainable practices in the Colombian film and TV production. The next expert is Susana. Susana Eslava is an interdisciplinary artist, editorial producer, and cultural manager. Her work explores the intersection between the territory, the landscape, and the daily and community practices. She has participated in artist residencies across the world, And in Bogota, she has worked developing different cultural projects, communities around the Colombia, focused on the construction of peace and cultural identity as a tool of change. And the last but not the least, Santiago Hernandez is a consultant for creative and cultural industries focused on connection, incubation, and development. He has been involved in curriculum building, currently international programs coordinator at the Global Leaders Program at the United States of America, and an independent consultant. We will now begin with Elena. I invite the audience to share their questions throughout Elena's presentations. The Q&A button is located at the bottom of the screen. So at the end of the presentation of Elena, you can submit your questions. Elena, welcome to this space. We are very glad to have you with us, and we are eager to hear about your experience with creative industries and their role in times of crisis. Elena, many thanks for joining us. The stage is yours.
Hello to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be connected with all of you. It's a very, very interesting, I would say, time, though it's really, really deeply traumatic, I believe so, for all of us. And the introduction to this discussion made me skeptic about this presentation that I will show you. You know, I will provide you, of course, with all the information and data on behalf of my expertise, from my expertise and from what is going on in Greece in general. But I think that you also emphasized my concern regarding this big trauma that I see that is happening is taking place in our societies, and I see that it's very, very important for us to be connected and to try to co-design new practices, new policies, and new methodologies that not only can revitalize and reactivate our economies, but can also reactivate ourselves, which I consider as something really, really important. I will share with you.
Yeah,
so in general, I think one of the major challenges in Greece, and I believe in many countries, is that it was a huge, especially in Greece, it was a huge acknowledgement of the role of the culture and creative industries. I think we recognize this and we acknowledge the importance of our culture and of our creativity, especially when our societies are going through a crisis. And it's something that we have experienced a few years ago when Greece was going through as you know, a huge economic crisis. And now again, we see ourselves being hit by a new and very unknown crisis on many levels. So we definitely, as Greek people, we recognize the assets that we hold and everyone can see, you know, when we are investigating our heritage and our culture. I will provide you some general info regarding what we had in our hands about, you know, information around creative economy. I think it was not since 2013 that we actually started to map and design information and see where we're standing. This was something very, very, very important for Greece, though for many important stakeholders, it was something that they acknowledged that they needed to see what kind of impact in numbers they were holding. But in 2014, there was a huge research that was developed on behalf of the university in Athens that actually gave us numbers around the culture and creative sector in Greece. And we saw that 46,370 enterprises were active in Greece, that amount in 2.1 billion of the GDP and employed 110,688 people. This is a huge number, and though I see that after many years we recognize that due to the labor issues and the undocumented employment, definitely these numbers would be, if we were trying to do a new research nowadays, it would be definitely a larger number. Which are the goals? Where do we see us from now and onwards? We see that we need to increase in 50% the culture contribution creative sector in the country. The number that we have seen in 2014 to be higher in the next few years. We need to double cultural experts, and we need to increase we need to see the increase of the average income of the employees of the sector by at least 20%, and improving, of course, the indicators and of the impact of culture on citizens based on the UNESCO, of course, models. The overall outlook of the culture and creative industries in Greece shows that despite the enormous downfall we experienced since 2008, in 2014, they record signs of recovery for the first time after 6 years, and that the culture and creative sector constitutes a fundamental pillar of the Greek economy. Only the region of Attica produces 75.5% of the gross value added on the CCIs in Greece, with 57.3% of creative enterprises, which employ 60.8% of employees as a whole. In another interesting chapter of this study that I pre-referred to of the university, refers to the international trade in cultural goods and cultural participation. According to the survey, although Greece is a net cultural goods importing country from 2008 to 2014, imports reduced by 51.2%. A big bank in Greece, actually the Bank of Greece, who is having a very active research team, has done a very interesting research, again in the same year of 2014, trying to shed some light to the challenges that we're facing regarding the development of a culture and creative sector, which is the absence of the medium-sized firm, the segmentation, of course, of the domestic market, and basically nobody knows. We're guessing, and we're not. We don't have a consensus around the creation of new cultural businesses. A lot of people have very loose labor relationships, project-based relationships, a lot of freelancers and self-employed. This is a problem also that we are facing now. In order, through a crisis, you need to provide certain benefits, and you don't have a clear view who is working, especially for artists and for people that are freelancers. Definitely the need for clustering and co-location, and of course the use of the social media. This research of the Bank of Greece is providing practical recommendation. I will definitely share those with you, because I see that though these researches happened, as I told you, in 2014, personally, I'm involved in the research and also development of strategies and policies around the cultural creative industries in Greece since 2013. And I'm actually acquainted with and not only acquainted, but pretty much connected with the development of the culture and creative economy in Latin America. I'm trying to see in which areas and in which let's say specific strategies maybe we have very common experiences and very common shared views. So I believe that it's something that for the last now 6-7 years is dynamically having a momentum now. Which means that we know the problems, we have done all the previous work, we just need to update the information, we definitely need to update the data and have a more clear view of what is happening. But in terms of what kind of material we hold in our hands to create a very dynamic strategy around the culture and creative industries for the post-COVID era, I think we have a very important material in our hands, and definitely a more solidarity consensus internationally in order to combine different perspectives and be aligned into certain specific, also economic oriented strategies. What I see as the strategic priorities for culture, I see definitely the audience development. We need to rethink how more accessible and more inclusive we are. Definitely the employment, that we need to see new opportunities, new incentives. The tax reforms is something that we're thriving in Greece. You know how the situation is due to the big loan that Greece is trying also to pay off, and the restrictions that we had also from the Troika. It's very difficult to get through this obstacle and pass certain suggestions, especially for culture. I recently had a discussion around the tax, to have a lower tax for artists and exhibitions. And when you are raising this discussion, you have the obstacle of if we do that for culture, then we need to do that for other goods as well. And I say yes, but culture is going to have a huge loss during the pandemic, and then it's a back and forth negotiation, not only I believe nationally, but also at the European level. So definitely we need to meet certain tax reforms around artists, exhibitions, books, film, and production, in order to be adapted to the new state and to the new scenery that we're going to see basically for the next months. And so we need to focus on education and skills, in new skills and capacity building in many sectors, and to also acknowledge the fact that we, as I said before, need to emphasize the fact of the soft skills. The soft skills is something that's going to actually make us more capable going through this huge crisis, and of course to face all the big trauma on many levels that the pandemic has caused to all of us. And another priority, strategic priority, I believe that I will give you some more information regarding this, because it's something very dynamic and it's been developing these months, is the access to funding. We have some new important and very, very serious new funding as the Guarantee Facility Fund, European funds, and how we use all this funding, how we create a strategy so all these resources are wisely used and effectively used. This is something that needs to be done and work for the best. And for culture, of course, to solve issues related to copyright. For cultural projects, the museums are the core of the development of our cities. Especially for Athens, it's a priority to see how we're going to use the asset of the National Archaeological Museum in the center of Athens and the Museum of Contemporary Art. But the role of arts and culture for local development, community engagement, and neighborhoods development is something hugely important. And now I believe the pandemic, with all these restrictions that we're facing, has given us another, let's say, opportunity to realize how dynamic can be museums and what kind of investments we should direct towards museums and cultural development. Another thing is that the local economies have a huge impact. Usually we're discussing about large investments and at let's say central level, but then we see that the local economies, the municipalities, how neighborhoods work with new investment. For example, in the center of Athens, there is a huge investment currently for cultural events of 7.7 million euros. So we need to invest more for the capacity building in the local sectors, in municipalities, in order to be able to use these resources wisely and effectively, and also be able to support them in a way that they can be more impact driven instead of just absorbing different financial resources. The third thing, which I consider also very important, are the policies and the reforms at the governmental level. I believe most of them are things that are related also with previous aspects that I discussed before that have to do with tax reforms, new museum modules, the skills and the labor market challenges, and of course to see how we can document, how we can have more information about people and creative people that are working in different sectors. Something that was announced these days, and I believe that it's going to create a huge impact, is that Greece is offering 50% tax cut to attract workers from abroad. A lot of people are coming back to Greece. I believe that most of us have been following how Greece was having like a brain drain the last years and everybody was leaving. So we are having a different movement to Greece. And this government has offered the 50% exemption on income earned for 7 years. And this package will be available during 2021 for anyone who hasn't been a Greek tax resident within the last 7 years. So we're trying to get people back. We're trying to get more youth and more new talent from abroad. It was also advertised and on Monocle in this next issue that. And it was like an example, and we were very proud to see that Athens is going to be seeing young Greeks return from abroad to set up ventures at home. So we have like a new movement, like from brain drain to brain gain. And we are trying also to brand and to see how we can create new strategies and new, let's say, branded packages for people and professionals that wish to come to Greece and invest. And I believe this is it's a combination with the new funding opportunities and the secure of the 31 billion from Recovery Fund and the 40 billion from Cohesion Fund. So the focus is basically on grid and digital transition, and of course the collaboration schemes that are going to be developed for the absorption of these fundings is going to be very, very interesting, and it's going to create a very dynamic, let's say, new scenery around the development of Greece. So the 15, let's say, main projects that were announced have to do with energy upgrade of buildings, interconnection of islands, 5G networks, digital upgrading of great companies, digitization, new frameworks and content of training and retaining programs, local and special urban plans, transport, individual electronic health file, and national prevention program. A lot to do with diversity and how, because Greece, as you know, it's a very close also to the migration and refugees. We need to see how we're going to be facilitating all these new cultures and diversity, accelerated administration of justice, linking university research. I consider this is very, very, very important because it was like isolated people in the governments that are doing their own R&D and they're not consciously connected with what is happening in the field and especially in the researches. It was the first time, and this is a historical moment, that at this kind of level, culture is included. So we have managed to negotiate that many cultural projects are going to be included in this package, and especially focused on innovation and on creative industries, which is something that is a very hopeful thing to see after so many years striving to do advocacy around culture and creative industries. And then, of course, the 15 is private investments, how we can create financial tools for private investment that enhance the competitiveness of the Greek economy and upgrade the productive model of the country. I'm not a person that I'm very connected with the tourism sector, but I believe that we have a unique opportunity to multiply the impact and the asset around tourism. There is a strategic plan around tourism for the next 10 years. During the pandemic, this year, approximately 5 million foreign visitors, enforcing health and safety guidelines were most meticulously adhered to, and the tourism-related service sector has seen that it's necessary to see how Greece, that is mostly connected with tourism, needs to see a strategic plan for the next years. The digital transformation, it's something that is booming also in many sectors. I believe it's a challenge for culture and also the digital transformation. And of course, the big projects that I have explained to you that are in the core of the urban development in Greece, and they're going to transform the scenery for the next years. To close that, I would like to emphasize that it's also the first time that the Ministry of Culture is trying to see what kind of role it plays in the cultural and creative industries development. We have in our plans to create a special entity that is going to provide dedicated support for the CCIs. It's going to be based in Athens. It's near the National Archaeological Museum, which is the new under development big project for Greece, and is going to be a dedicated hub for capacity building for the CCIs under the lead of the Ministry of Culture, and expected to be launched by end of this year. So, in order to make also a connection between our heritage, tourism, and contemporary culture, I believe these are the three, let's say, highlights of Greece. Normally, we are mostly connected with our heritage and more well known for our heritage, and definitely for tourism as a touristic destination. But the fact that we have a very dynamic and very interesting art scene and cultural scene connected with the contemporary art is something that we need to invest more. The National Museum of Contemporary Art was not, let's say, we had this building, we had this entity for many years, and was not structured in a way that can support and can enable contemporary creativity to flourish. And now it's becoming a priority for Greece, because we have realized that especially young people and people living in other cities are coming for contemporary art and are looking for what is happening now. And we are also can bridge local creativity with international creativity. So it is something that we are trying to invest more and to see this museum flourish and create a bridge with the international scene. And we see also people coming from abroad and create small other galleries and interesting cultural venues in areas that are either under development or areas that were not, let's say, one of the highlights in our cities. But people like Nicolas Belevance from Beirut, it's a very interesting story, and I would like to share with you. He decided to move from Beirut and create a creative hub in Athens, near the port in Piraeus, where I'm also born. It's my neighborhood. So it was interesting to visit this underdevelopment area and meet a young guy from Beirut that was seeing the charm and the potential of this neighborhood, and create his gallery there and create like a movement around this neighborhood from other people and other stakeholders that also join him. And now we have 3 new spaces in this area where nothing was taking place. So in order to stop at this point and hear your views and receive your questions after the rest, of course, of the panels, what I would like to say is that the pandemic has made us realize that where we live and where we create is very, very important. So people that were raised and born in Greece, I see that they're coming back. They're coming back for this reactivation of our economy, for the regeneration of our cities. So I see that many people are coming back to Greece, and it's very promising. Instead of living and see them living and being disappointed with their with the situation. And we also see and we welcome new people from other cities and from other places of the world that are charmed also from this country, and they come and they create new projects, creative projects, and definitely projects connected to contemporary art and culture. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena, for sharing with us your experience in Greece. I really found it fascinating, the role of the culture in time of crisis. Okay, all the figures, all the public policies that it is going on implementing in Greece. We have some questions. We have 4 questions. I'm going to read them on order. So the first one is, I would like to know how the economic reactivation in the culture sector is including gender lens, any good practice or case studies. There is another question about public policy for the creative industries heavily relied on the interests and projects each administration in pursuing, and there trends to be disconnected between national and local administration. What is a strategy to align then priorities and efforts to achieve long-lasting goals and not only short-term results? There is another, the term culture export really fascinated me. I seems fascinated big challenges on visa regimes into various has become a reality, which is also evident from this webinar. From this webinar, I think we can involve IT-related apps and other solutions to achieve cultural export at global level. Furthermore, first one is someone want to know how the economic reactivation in the culture sector is including gender lens. Any good practices or case studies?
There is no specialty regarding this thing. Actually, what is lacking in Greece that is not like we're having a huge expertise on this subject. It's something that we are trying to get. For example, in order to create certain feasibility studies, we needed to get expertise from abroad. I believe that there are a lot of people that hold this expertise that are quite active in other cities, but it's not something that is that we hold this expertise. So, but I believe that's something that we need to take into account and see how we're going to be organizing for the future and include it in our strategies and methodologies. But it's not something that I'm personally familiar with.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, maybe Norma can complement us later. And there is another that is about public policies for the creative industries. They mentioned that they rely heavily on the interests of projects of each administrations. So they tend to be a long-term, short-term results, not looking to achieve long-term results. So I don't know if based on your experience in Greece.
Yes, yeah. we are trying to not to create the new policies solely with the expertise that we hold on the governmental level. I think in order to introduce effective policies, you need to co-create them. You need to harvest all the information for different sectors from people that are working in specific sectors, in specific industries. Otherwise, it's not like you create a recipe for everything. You know, you need to see what kind of policies you need to introduce, for example, for the book industry, and what kind of policy you need to introduce for the film industry. I think that in the conscious of at this level, it's the first time that we are trying to organize and separate this kind of work methodically, and I think we are working on towards a very promising path at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Elena, for your presentation and your answer. I will now invite our panel to turn on their cameras as we move on to explore the current state of our creative, cultural, tourism, and service industries through the current crisis of the pandemic. So the first round is this one. We begin with a general question. Each of the panel participants, please try to keep up your answer under 3 minutes. So we want the panelists to tell us, how has your industry been affected, and what have been the biggest vulnerabilities and lessons learned from this pandemic? So I want to make some introduction or context. Diseases are an intrinsic part of human history. We are currently suffering from the coronavirus, but since human beings began to organize themselves in society, we live together in the same territorial space, so contagious disease took a special role. Pandemics have a certain recurrence. We have seen that 100 years ago, the Spanish flu impact the economy, the swine flu, MERS, SARS, many others, and it is estimated that more will come. At the current situation, we look at the impacts in the short term, but it is necessary to think about long-term implications as well. So let's begin. Norma, one of the sectors most affected by the health crisis produced by the COVID pandemic has undoubtedly been the cinema. Its effects are left international, from Hollywood to Bollywood, through national film industry. The pandemic has short and long-term consequences. Please tell us how your industry has been impacted, and please share with us some lessons learned through this pandemic.
Well, I will start saying that yes, the film industry, I would say it has been the most affected among the other industries or creative industries. We have seen many changes, starting with the distribution process, where having cinemas closed all around the world has affected the whole industry and the dynamic of distribution. So in my perspective as a festival, I was affected because we didn't have the chance to present films or new films or any kind of films due to the COVID-19. So the distributors were holding back the premieres and any kind of exhibition of their content. And so we needed to change the perspective, and many of the distributors and festivals were moving towards virtual events, which are not easy either. So that was like the first step that the industry took to try to move and keep doing what they were doing. However, we decided as festival that we didn't want to put our festival as a virtual event, because the film is an experience, and when you go to the cinema you have an experience, and you go with someone else or you go alone, but you have any kind of people around you, and then you feel the emotion and you feel the sound, and you watch the film with another and from another perspective than watching the film in a screen in your home alone or with your dogs barking, which happened a lot to me. So it's not the same. And I would say that the film industry will take time to recover. We don't know when exactly all the cinemas in Colombia particularly will be open. And we have seen that in Europe, they try to open and they need to close again the cinemas. So it's just trying to go and then go back to steps. So it's very unfortunate, this pandemic, and I believe that the film industry, it has been very slow to realize how to overcome this. Hopefully for, I would say, mid-year next year, we will have a better picture and we will have better steps to take and try to figure out what to do with this and the film industry. But for sure, we are the most affected in terms of content and public events, and because it's an experience, and you need people to gather together and to go to the cinemas together. And I believe that the drive-through cinemas are a good choice, a good opportunity. But in Colombia, at least, we don't have new content to be exhibited in this drive-through cinemas. So people are not going as we were expecting them to go, because they don't have new content to watch, and the content that they can watch going to the drive-through cinemas, you can watch it and download it to your phone. So that's the issue. It is very particular, and I would say that it's the same with music and festivals. So it is kind of sad, but we need to realize that in some point we need to go to the cinemas again. That's my perspective.
Okay, thank you, Norma. Sorry. I was telling that I agree with you that to go to the cinema is much better to feel the sound, the screen, all the emotions that it transfers to us. Okay, the next question is for Susana. After weeks of a gradual decline, a consensus forecast for the world GDP growth in 2020, 2020 is minus 3.9%. Worldwide unemployment continues to rise. Government's response and fiscal stimulus plans continue. Concerns over the spread of COVID-19 remains volatile. Employment prospects have consistently improved since July. Most employments favor working remotely, full-time post-lockdown. So, Susana, these are some general figures. However, we would like to know your point of view regarding, from your professional experience, how the culture and the sector has been affected and some lessons you could share with us under this pandemic.
Thank you, Enrique, and it's a pleasure to be here and to share this panel with my fellow speakers. I'd like to briefly introduce myself and tell you what I do and which is my sector. I currently have the fortune of coordinating and facilitating the Programa de Escuelas Taller de Colombia of the Ministry of Culture. This is a strategy that through educational programs related to cultural heritage crafts seeks to safeguard the cultural memory of our territories and create development opportunities for the maker communities in Colombia. Referring to your question, our biggest challenge, I mean, we've had a lot of challenges because of the pandemic, but probably some of the biggest have been realizing that the majority of the communities related to cultural craft makers, maker activities in Colombia are considered informal workers and part of a non-active and unrecognized part of our economy. This has had a huge impact on their opportunities to break historical, economic, and social gaps. This is not news. This is not something that we are just learning, but definitely is something that has been enhanced by the current situation. And likewise, we have become more conscious of the huge connectivity gap in Colombia that makes it really challenging for rural and socially vulnerable communities to access remote education, to access remote or virtual opportunities to ignite small businesses, small commercial transactions, etc. As I said, unfortunately, these are not new conclusions for the field of cultural arts and crafts, but it is true that this situation is enhancing these huge historical problems and historical debts, and hopefully they will push us to develop projects that directly address these problems.
Okay, thank you, Susana. Okay, the next question is for Luisa. Currently, tourism is a key sector in the world economy, thanks to the high growth rates, and it has been experiencing over the last years. And Colombia is a popular destination, enjoying a positive trend in inbound tourism, with a 3% increase. Tourism is the second largest generator of foreign revenue in Colombia, preceded by the mining and energy sector, yet surpassing traditional products such as coffee, flowers, and bananas. However, it is also characterized by being quite vulnerable to any crisis that directly affects it, as we have seen in the last months. So, Luisa, could you tell us about the impact on the tourism sector and some lessons learned through this pandemic?
Yes. Hi, so much for the invitation. Just to give a little bit of context, my name is Luisa. I live in the region of Cauca, which is one of the regions most affected by the armed conflict in Colombia. Since 5 years ago, I decided to become a social entrepreneur because I realized like all of these difficulties that my region was like facing, and I decided to provide solutions through the tourism sector. So what I did was to start a local organization in order to promote tourism activities in former war territories, and by empowering the communities most affected by that. Since then, we have been developing different tourism activities, and it has been really interesting to see how like visitors come with that interest to contribute not only to the social change here, but also to contribute to peace building. However, yeah, like this crisis has impacted us a lot, and I'm pretty sure like basically all the business in the tourism sector in Colombia and around the world. One of the biggest like challenges has been like to understand or maybe to think how to provide opportunities for the communities that live because of tourism. We need to understand that this is a day-to-day activity, and people basically live because of the daily activities that they do. And by not having like visitors, it has been really difficult to think in other ways of doing tourism. Another of the big challenges is that some of the organizations are quite small and are very local. So some of the like initiatives that have been developed by the government uh, doesn't work for these organizations because as they are small. For example, they cannot request loans, or they cannot request like different initiatives that have been developed by the government. So right now, like there is a lot of like challenges happening at the moment. Just like last week, for example, in Cauca, the tourism sector was like talking again because the travel agencies are in a really bad situation at the moment. One of the like opportunities that we have is that right now, like there are some organizations that are reactivating like the tourism sectors, and here's where I want to do like that invitation to everyone, like to support the local tourism, because sometimes we don't value what we don't know. And sometimes we think that because we live in this region or we live here, we will be able to visit this area at any point. So instead of visiting local, we decided to go maybe international or being like visiting other places far away. But my invitation right now is that if you really want to contribute to reactivation of this sector, start by promoting the local initiatives that are in the area. And it's right now like the local organization, they are facing a lot of challenges, and the best way to contribute is to support them in what we do. For example, right now, what is happening with San Andres and the hurricane, I will say that the good way to help is to visit San Andres, to go and support. And I will say that another important part of the tourism is that it's a way to interconnect people and to develop intercultural dialogue, and also to develop more empathy and compassion. So I will say that if you decide, for example, to visit San Andres, it will be a really good initiative to go and support as a volunteer in any kind of activity that they need at this moment. And yeah, like in regards to what is going to happen in the future, I will say that technology is a really good opportunity. We are working to develop some virtual tours because we also have understood that this is really important to do it. And even if maybe something new, there are a lot of people in different, also really interested to hold these intercultural dialogues and to learn from different cultures. So I will say that definitely this is a good way to start also to by joining this kind of virtual tour.
Okay, thank you, Luisa, and thank you for your advice to support San Andres Providencia, to interconnect people and volunteer in this crisis that they are suffering right now. So the next question is for Santiago. Creative and cultural industries are one of the sectors most affected by the current crisis. The measures of social distancing adopted to avoid contagion in the pandemic are significantly impacted on culture and creative industry, for the most part of micro, small, and medium-sized companies and artists and self-employed workers. So Santiago, as you are a creative and cultural industrial consultant focused on connection, incubation, and development, how has your sector been affected, and what have been the biggest vulnerabilities and lessons learned through this pandemic?
Okay, Enrique, thank you very much for this question. I'm, what I'm dedicated to do in my everyday life is to understand the general landscape of how creative industries develop by themselves, how they connect with the individuals that are part of it, and how the work and the results of these kind of industries can be perceived in the environmental, social, and financial sector. Um, and I have to say that from the cultural and creative industries perspective, um, including, for example, what we just heard from Norma and well, what every one of our panelists is that the sector has been incredibly affected because of the in-person restrictions that we had to live. Uh, our sector heavily relies in connecting human beings, in exploring emotions, in exploring sensations, in uh, enriching the intellectual of every human being that is present as an attendee to these kind of events. So yes, having this kind of restriction, closing theaters, closing cinemas, closing music halls, left everyone without a clear idea of where to go. As you know, everyone started to go into a digital transition. And this is the point where the smallest or the rural areas had this huge gap because of the lack of access and the lack of resources that they had to be there, to be present into the, well, in the economy and in the mindset of those who were trying to support the process. So yes, that natural element of connecting human beings and connecting peer experiences was the element that nobody was expecting to have. What can we say that has been learned? We have learned that even though there are different kind of elements to replicate those kind of experiences online, or in different kind of distribution settings, the human connection and the human experience is something that it's really difficult to replicate because you are having all the time different kind of external distractions. So, for example, we were hearing just a few minutes ago how watching a movie in Netflix is not the same as in going to the movies. And we have perceived that in the past. For example, Roma is a movie that was presented a few years ago that was streamed in Netflix as well as in cinemas. And the general comment was that watching it in Netflix lowered the experience and the emotion of the movie. So if it's time to try to explore different kinds of elements that could help artificial intelligence and augmented reality experience to try to address those situations for those kind of contents that can be delivered through these means. But also it is crucial, as we were just hearing, to support the local artists or to try to give the elements to those local or local makers to share what they're doing to the world. I think there's a big opportunity to understand what are the needs and what are the remarkable elements that they are creating. And it's a great opportunity to try to find different kind of customers or markets or segments that could actually buy or be interested in acquiring them. So it's not only about going local, it's also about thinking how local can be geolocalized in a different market around the world to gather or to, well, promote the sector and the activities that they are doing.
Okay, thank you, Santiago, for sharing with us your point of view. In my case, I realized that it's important the explosion of emotions, sensations, and yeah, of course, the social distancing. It is a big restriction in this business. Okay, so we are move on to the second round of questions. We will now move on to talk about the way forward. So I will now want the panelists to tell us how they see their industry changing or adapt in the past pandemic. I don't know, some trends or what you consider is important to share with the audience. So maybe a personal, something that you are working on in this moment, or a special situation that you can share with us. So the first question is for Norma. Despite the fact that since the second week of September, the cinemas have been authorized by the government to open, most of the companies have not done so for two fundamental reasons. The first one is that because it is not profitable, given the initially authorized capacity, only 20%, for the operation of each theater, so which is really small. And the second one is basically because there are no premiere films, as you mentioned before. Tomorrow, more than 100 cinemas and about 500 theaters will open their doors nationwide. So it will begin the campaign to reopen the film industry in Colombia. So what sort of industrial changes in the pandemic bring to your industry, and how is the industry adapting to this new reality? Norma.
Well, it's a good question. I would say is more like the industry wants, like the exhibitors part of the industry wants to start again and try to get people going to the cinemas. However, I'm not sure which kind of content they are presenting. I haven't I don't know if they have any new content to be presented. I believe that they have, because if they are opening is because they have a strategy. But the reason is that, as you said, is because it's not profitable. Like, you cannot expect people going to the cinema and having, for instance, the Cinemateca, the public cinema here in Colombia, in Bogota, they have the biggest room for 250 or 70 people, but they are allowed just for 50 people to go and watch a film. And if you put on top of that, the cost of the ticket is just around $2, less than that. It's not profitable at all, because you have to pay the producers for the fee of the film, and you have the marketing strategy, and you have now the protocols for COVID-19. So I really hope that people go to the cinemas, and the cinemas are packed in terms of the availability of them to have people. And I will also hope that they have thought on independent films to be part of this activation of the industry, because the Colombian film industry is driven by the Hollywood market. So we just watch films from Hollywood, and then some from France, and then one or two from Colombia. So I really hope that the industry have thought about the Colombian films, and then the Latin American films and other independent productions to be presented and be part of this reactivation of the industry as an opportunity to present and create different audiences from different kind of content. I believe that documentaries and other kind of content will be available if we don't focus on Hollywood premieres. So maybe that's a strategy. Maybe that's why the cinemas are reopening. And I really hope that people go and watch as many as films they can and support the industry right now, because we really depend on that. Because the funds for production in Colombia depends on the sales from the exhibitors. So if we don't have cinemas open, we won't have next year productions in Colombia. That's the reality. Unless the government have a package that haven't been announced yet to support the industry. So we are not sure if next year the producers will have funds to get done their films. So if people would like to support the industry, they need to go to the cinema and buy the ticket. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Norma, for your answer. The next question is for Santiago. Although there are a good number of young companies and innovative startups that are providing solutions to the challenges that the COVID-19 has brought, reality shows us that there are ventures and organizations that support them are suffering severely from the impacts of the pandemic. Entrepreneurs, young companies, and the institutions that support them are among the groups particularly affected by the pandemic and should be taken into account the relief measures proposed by the public policies. Could you explain to us what are the changes in the entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs in the post-pandemic scenario in the creative and cultural industries?
Okay, thank you very much for the question, Enrique. Yes, indeed, there has been a growth in the entrepreneurship environment and ecosystem in Colombia, trying to foster specifically the skills that any entrepreneur needs to be able to go to market, right? And this has been like a national effort from, well, the government in Colombia right now, trying to foster how people can formalize their projects, transform them into formalized entrepreneurships, and be able to position themselves in the local and the international market. The problem is right now that most of those activities were aimed to have like in-person experiences for the local markets. And those creative industries that were looking forward to internationalize their efforts are more into the world of handcrafts or products that can be literally exported. As we just heard, the creation of contents in Colombia is going to have a huge struggle, which is actually suffering right now, because it will not be possible to get large-scale productions in any kind of field. Now, these cultural entrepreneurs have been immersed in also a very interesting moment of their lives, which is a very long period of introspection, a long period of trying to understand what they're doing and finding themselves with themselves in artistic or cultural terms. So we're starting to see a new rise of new content that can be developed by individuals or by small groups. So that's why there are new kind of strategies aiming to share small and, let's say, intimate productions to local markets. Hopefully that's a strategy that it's going to be successful. We will need to see in the following years the results of these projects. But at the same time, it's something that is happening worldwide. For example, a lot of the national portfolio organizations by the Arts Council in the United Kingdom are focusing their efforts into downscaling whatever they're doing and trying to focalize it in their local communities. Because having these long scale productions or having a broad impact in a huge audience right now, it's something that it's really hard to achieve. So yes, the main strategy that's being used or that should be on the top of the head of anyone who is trying to develop a cultural industry or a creative industry is to understand the local needs and how could they achieve any kind of solution or provide a product that it's actually received and that can be paid for by the market right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Santiago, for sharing with us. Yeah, I found that we need to formalize entrepreneurship. To overcome the in-person limitations will be a big challenge, but we need to support them or find a way to support them. Okay, the next question is for Susana. The marriage of creativity with talent, culture, and technology is a bit too advanced an economic sector that has been marginalized in Colombia for many years, mainly due to not recognizing its potential. Today, the country knows that the creative industry, also known as the orange economy, have a greater share of GDP than mining and coffee.
generate more high quality jobs, and offer countless export possibilities to the leverage. From 2002 to 2019, the world's creative industry grew more than 100%. These figures demonstrate the opportunity in front of us and the importance that this sector has in Colombia and in the world. So could you explain to us what are those changes in that you can see from the Ministry of Culture or in the work that you are working on in this moment, Susana?
Yes, thank you, Enrique. Well, as I said before, the programa de Escuelas Taller de Colombia is a strategy that seeks to improve the working conditions of local craft makers and generate opportunities for the expansion of their knowledge to their local communities and others. For us, craft makers are the cultural entrepreneurs that Santiago was talking about, and are the innovators and the some of the main actors of the creative industries in the national territory. So that's from the point of view that I'm going to speak from, because I really believe that they should also be accounted as very relevant sector of our economy. And that's precisely what I think that is one of the measures that we can do to contain the effects of the pandemic. First of all, I think that we need to end with the narrative that states that the craft makers in Colombia aren't an active part of an economy. They are indeed a very active and vital part of the economies in our country. And in this sense, they should be considered as such through programs that are designed according to their necessities and by policies that promote the strengthening of local knowledge, as well as the use of local raw materials and the commercialization of local products. As I said, I think that from our program and from the strategy of the Escuelas Taller and Talleres Escuela of the Ministry of Culture, we really are trying to work hand in hand with local craft women and men, giving the value to their traditional know-how and their life experiences that needs to be given. I do think that we, as a country, we need to create the means for rural communities to access platforms of commerce that allow them to sell their products and that allow them to align and stay update to dynamics of the current market. I also think that as a society, we need to start to embrace traditional know-how and traditional ways of learning as valid ways of learning. Unfortunately, in Colombia, we are used to relate our social status and the value of our ideas with the amount of diplomas from schools or universities that we collect. And I think that this has blinded us from the vast richness that our ancestors have, that our territories guard, that are mainly based on the sustainable use of our resources, on the interpretation of our own history, of our own cultural identity. And I think that that is precisely what we are trying to do with our program of Escuelas Taller and Talleres Escuela. We are trying to dignify, enhance, and promote those other ways of learning that don't necessarily occur within a classroom or a university, but that happen in the workshops of makers and in the fields of agriculture. I am truly convinced that the recovery and preservation of these knowledges can also become a way to imagine future in a sustainable way through the use of traditional technologies and traditional innovation. I do think that innovation doesn't necessarily need to be thought as hand in hand with the new, but also it needs to be reflected upon as the recovery of traditions and the recovery of knowledge. And that is why I really think that we have to work towards the protection of these knowledges and the dynamization of these economies through policies and programs designed bottom up, hand in hand with the craft makers communities, and not from decentralization of the government. And that, as I said before, is what is our bet from the program that I work on, to understand what the communities need, understand the value that the communities guard in terms of cultural knowledge, and to help them promote them and make a sustainable life out of them. I also think that we have to break the stigma that the protection of heritage crafts is a synonym of isolating them and not problematizing them. On the contrary, I think we should think of heritage crafts as a way of imagining the future. And we need to involve the new generations in that process and have them appropriate them and help them dynamize these creative economies. I really think that arts and crafts are a way to recognize ourselves as part of a community, and to build social bonds, and in that sense to think together in a sustainable, peaceful future. This idea needs to align with the general idea of sustainability from a community point of view and from a cultural point of view. And for this reason, I really think that we need to give the sector of the craftsmaker a stronger agency in the construction of our policies, but also in the construction of our identity as a country, which I am sure reflects much better through our local makers and our farmers and our rural communities than through the general news that we hear every day, and the new symbols that have become like these national identities. And in that sense, I think that a program such as the Escuelas Taller de Colombia, which precedes the strategy that we now call Orange Economy, I do think it aligns perfectly with the strategy, but I also think that it prevails upon many strategies as such, because the roots of a program such as the Escuela Taller comes before these type of strategies, aligns with them, but also I think will go much further than these policies. I don't know if I answered your question, but
yes,
I do think that, okay.
Okay, Susana, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us your experience with Escuela Taller de Colombia. I found fascinated the work you are doing there with the local craft workers, the importance that they have, the new knowledge, those different ways of transfer knowledge. and the importance to understand the needs of the local communities. So they give up a deeper understanding of the sector and what you are doing or the Minister of Culture is doing right now. So thank you. The next question is for Luisa regarding changes in the tourism sector. It is said that the increasing biosecurity measures, digitalization, as you mentioned before, changes in consumption patterns, increased social awareness towards more sustainable travel, empathy with local communities, short trip distance, local travel, as you also mentioned, flexibility in certain times, and hybrid events, so face-to-face and virtualizations, virtual reality tours, may be some of the trends. So I want you to expand or share with us some trends and strategies that we should consider in order to boost our tourism in the short term and long term.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, indeed. I agree with Susanna. I think that all people know just different things, and that's what is happening with the communities, with the rural communities. All of them know different things. For example, with the indigenous communities, they know ancestral knowledge about in medicine or in different sectors. And I think it's just an amazing experience to get immersed by learning from these communities. So I believe that right now, like the tourism is going through that direction where as a tourist we are becoming more responsible, like more oriented to contribute to social change and to learn from things that you cannot easily find in books. So I believe that the sector will go to that direction, and at the same time I believe that this is the time to explore and to visit and to connect with those communities that during years have been like in silence or have been putting away from our scope. So I think that this is like the best way to do it. And also, I just want to share an experience that we did like 2 years ago. As I mentioned, we are based in a region that for many years had a lot of problems with insecurity and this kind of factors because of the armed conflict that Colombia lived. And then because of that reason, we become aware that people don't want to travel because they still have like that fear of the different insecurity things that could happen. And for that reason, like 2 years ago, we decided to develop a virtual tour of a community that is called Sylvia. I'm going to send the link just in the chat. So it was a tour that we developed with virtual reality technology, where we showcase basically one of the former wars, but now one of the main destinations in this region. And it's very interesting because this is a place where live the indigenous community, Bisak. And it was fantastic to see how they can share like their perspective or their place like through this kind of technologies. So what I will say is that, if you are still scared because of the COVID or all the things that could happen, there are like this kind of initiatives that you can also support, like virtual tours. Right now we are seeing how in Airbnb there are a lot of virtual experiences that you can do just by being at home, but at the same time you can contribute to support like these communities. So yeah, as a conclusion, I would say that technology is here, and probably the fear about COVID and all these things will stay for a few more months. So for now, I will encourage you to or to support like these virtual activities.
Okay, thank you, Luisa, for sharing with us your experience in Cauca and what you are doing. That we need to be a more responsible tourist to connect with local communities. And I'm going to check the link you shared with us on the importance of the technologies. So thank you for that. I have a question for Elena that I wanted to ask before, but I couldn't. So according to figures from Migración Colombia, that is a migration institute in Colombia, since the lockdown on March, on average, 100,000 migrants have returned to Venezuela. However, after the reactivation of the economy in Colombia, Hundreds of Venezuelans in search of opportunities have embarked on a new journey through Colombia roads towards the interior of the country. And it is said that from one Venezuelans that go to their country came with another 2 people. So to make the big picture of this, we went from having 140,000 regular foreigners to almost 2 million people in less than 3 years. The migration of Venezuelans to Colombia is the second largest in the world in this decade, and the country has not prepared for that, generating great social and economic pressure. So as you, Elena, as an expert, and Greece is one of the main countries that receive migrants, how can we prepare our country in a positive way to insert a wave of migration? So could you share with us your experience in which you use the culture in a good way to incorporate those foreigners or migrants to Greece? So maybe we can take those suggestions or ideas to implement those in Colombia.
Well, it's funny because I was invited from the Colombian government a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago, for a similar discussion around migration and culture. I learned something, I learned some really interesting information about this challenge and this incoming flow of new population from Venezuela. Of course, we understand that the characteristics are completely different. The exercise for Greece was different due to the diversity of the incoming refugees. We are speaking about different cultures, different languages. Of course, the economic crisis was an issue. A lot of we have very good material of good practices from the field where culture work. We have good practices from the field of artistic cultural projects that were run in the camps, but also in entrepreneurship schemes and practices. But in general, I see that in your case, you have a unique opportunity because first you share a common language. So the cultural challenge is not that, let's say, without knowing in details, of course, the cultural difference, but it's not like it was in our case. So I see it like the bridge is much more easier in that case. Definitely you need to create a system to effectively be able to not only document, but to provide access to the basics, which means shelter, job opportunities, and skills development, of course. Cultural practices worked a lot also in Greece. I would like to refer to an example that may sound also familiar for your culture, is the example of the El Sistema. The El Sistema is a community project. You know, it's they create small orchestras with people from underprivileged communities, and they learn music through orchestras to children that do not have access to a regular lesson scheme or one-to-one. And this practice shows that people coming from these schemes, from this El Sistema methodology, they become better musicians than people that learn music from one-to-one. It has the provenance from Venezuela because it's where it first was practiced and invented and inspired a whole movement in Europe, and came to Greece and has actually has taught more than 1,500 children, and has also developed this expertise for orchestras, etc. So culture can unite people. Culture can provide very efficient and facilitate people to communicate. And music, arts, we see that I have worked for many communities, not only for underprivileged communities, but definitely for migrants and refugees, especially when you have, in our case, the obstacle of a different language and a different culture. You know, when you are entering a music lesson, sometimes speaking the same language is not necessary. You can overcome that, and you can create a bridge, and you can connect with people. So if I can refer to one example, that would be a very commonly shared practice.
Okay, thank you, Elena, for that, for sharing with us that experience. Yeah, we don't have the language barrier, so as you have maybe in Greece. So the narrow here, the bridge is narrow than in your country. Yeah, we try to provide access to the basics, to provide job opportunities. And I found fascinating to use the culture, the music that integrate people and unite communities. So thank you. Maybe Santiago wants to complement or to add some to the Elena's reply.
Thank you very much, Enrique. And yes, indeed, I would like to add something that is very interesting about this topic. I have had the chance to work with El Sistema Greece previously, actually, and it's a very nice initiative. And it's very interesting because El Sistema is an artistic movement based in orchestral music that was actually born in Venezuela. So first of all, I wanted to mention this because I find it really, really interesting how this artistic movement that was born in this country has expanded all over the world as a bridge between communities, as a space to form soft skills in human beings, and also has resulted in one of the best classical musicians that the history has seen in the last few years. So yeah, that as a starting point. And as a second element, here in Colombia, we need to be completely aware that this migrant situation is not something that is going to be, that it's not going to have any kind of short-term solution. This is going to be a long-term issue. And because of that, we need to acknowledge that we are sharing the same language, as you all know. We are sharing a lot of cultural elements that we have in common, starting as, for example, the music from the Llanos Orientales, our cowboys music, let's say, and so many elements that gather or that can reunite the cultural elements between Venezuelans and Colombians. Using art as a means to develop or to close that gap and to generate a sense of common objectives and common community, it's something that is really necessary for our country. Now, this should not only come from public initiatives. I do believe that this is where, when I was talking a few moments ago about cultural entrepreneurs and creative entrepreneurs, this is where different kind of social or NGO or business-oriented initiatives could make use of arts in any of these forms, say theater, visuals, music, to create elements that gathers community. Now, these need some investment either from public or from private institutions, but here is where the social innovators have a space to create solutions for the long run in these kind of situations.
Okay, may I add one small thing, because you have created a wonderful bridge, one small detail, maybe to give you an insight regarding what Enrique has said.
No, sorry, Elena. Yeah, if you want to to make any question, feel free. We are in the final stage of this part, so please. So if you have any question, please ask to the other panelists.
No, no, it's not a question. It's basically an observation that the common language that I see it as and the shared, let's say, culture, and I found it so interesting. I believe that the economic development that this kind of integration in your country is going to be it's going to be like a case study. If the investment is going to be wisely directed and with efficiency and towards the right, let's say, programs and projects, I believe it's going to be a unique opportunity for economic development for Colombia on many sectors. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to be phasing for the next year. But definitely you need a strategy and an alliance of the key stakeholders and a good collaboration between the private and the public. That is always, also in our case, it was like the key. We cannot move into isolation. Stakeholders that are managing a big challenge, not only the migration or the economic crisis or now the COVID situation, they need a larger collaboration and a more open collaboration. Otherwise, it's not working. It's not the role of one. It's not the role of only the government or another, let's say, stakeholder, but it's the emphasis on the alignment of the key stakeholders and the directed good investment and strategic investment of resources.
Okay, thank you, Elena, for your comments. Okay, so yeah, it is important the economic development from the next years. So as we have only 10 minutes. We will now look, I don't know, maybe if there is a common question for all of you. So we will now look into how we can build back better, how we can make our industry more resilient to future shocks, or I don't know, any reflection that you want to share with us, something really short, 1 minute, maximum 2 minutes. So please, each one, I don't know, Norma maybe wants to begin, so Susana, I don't know.
Sure. Well, I think that the film and TV industry is aware about their impact on our planet in terms of environmental impacts and also equality, gender equality. So I think and I hope that the other industries like in Colombia will take actions to reduce and mitigate their environmental impact, because this pandemic is because of our relationship with other species. So we cannot forget that, and we need to address that problem from different perspectives. And I believe that the film industry has a role to play here. One is educating people through films and through content, and other is on sets, on locations. We need to regulate the film industry and the TV industry and try to move forward being sustainable. I think that's the way. I think that all industries need to think themselves as a sustainable industry. So yes, I hope that we can close the gender gap as we were discussing on the chat before, and we can reduce the impact that actually is quite big for the film and industries. And 1 hour of TV is emitting around 9 tons of CO2, which is a lot. So we need to be aware of that. We need to take actions to be more sustainable and consider others in this planet from the industry.
Okay, Thank you, Norma. Susana, do you have any final?
Yes.
I know.
Sure, thank you. Yes, I think that I would like to continue Norma's call for reflecting upon the way that we not only relate to nature and our ecosystem, but to each other. I do think that for centuries now, we have created this fiction that some people should have more voice or should have more agency than others. And I do think that what we need to do is precisely unlearn all that narrative and give more voice, amplify the voices of our rural communities, of our women, of the people that live in the territories, that work with with agricultural resources, to our people of color, our indigenous people, because we do need to realize that this current situation is an alert to rethink the way that we were automatically going on the path that we were following as a society. These will for sure have an impact in the distribution of our resources, of our goods, but I'm sure that if we again become a more broad and participatory community, the result will be more positive and will allow us to think of a sustainable future.
Okay, Susana, thank you. Luisa, do you want to share with us some final remarks?
Yes, I think that, yeah, my final opinion is very connected to what Susana was also mentioning. I think it's the moment to reconnect with these communities, with the rural communities, to learn from them. I know that there are a lot of communities that they have the solution for the current challenges that we are facing with climate change, for example. There are a lot of rural communities that are developing compost initiatives, like a lot of initiatives that would be lovely for us to learn from them and also to implement in our cities. And yeah, I just encourage people to travel locally and to support these local initiatives that contribute to social change.
Okay, thank you, Luisa. And Santiago?
Okay, thank you, Enrique. And yes, to summarize some of my thoughts on regards of how our sector can be more resilient in the future and how can we build back better cities also to show whatever or everything that creative and cultural entrepreneurs are doing around the world. Well, in Colombia specifically, I would like to mention three main topics. The first of them is that all the skill building opportunities, all the education that is being provided by the public sector for the cultural and creative entrepreneurs in our country should try to aim not only to be directed for those who have the knowledge or the academic skills or the digital assets to be part of it, but should also be inclusive with the local and rural communities, because there lies, as Susana was saying, a big portion of the cultural value and heritage that our country has to export and to share around the world. So yes, like skill building opportunities should be open for everyone. Otherwise, the gap between the social fabric of our country is going to be bigger and bigger, and that will only lead to more difficult situations to address in the future. The second of them, to build better cities in the future for our sector, is making the most use of public space that we can. 2 days ago, the mayor of Bogota just showed how they are going to reshape some parts of the city, putting a big importance of making public space available for everyone, not only for cars. And these are the spaces in which artists can leverage and create new and small scale opportunities to show whatever we are doing. to allow people to lose fear of going to the cinemas later, to going to concerts, to going to big mass gatherings in the future. But we need to think locally using public spaces to start taking away those fears and creating a more engaged and vibrant community with the cultural and creative industries. And the third of them is that now that we are going to live, which I deeply believe we're going to live a very big explosion of creativity and inspiration because of the time that all the artists and cultural entrepreneurs had to immerse between themselves, is to allow spaces to talk and to be aware that there's a big connection, and the creative industries are a support network by themselves, taking the handcrafts by the artisans in local communities to the tourism sector, creating different kind of documentaries from them to, I mean, there's so many synergies possible in the creative industry that don't happen only because we are not in constant communication of what is happening or what can be our opportunities. All of that always under the lens of a more inclusive and equal and sustainable society. But yeah, those are my three main thoughts about the future.
Okay, thanks, Santiago. Thanks to all the speaker and panelists for your contribution to the discussion. We are coming up on time very rapidly, so thank you very much, Elena, Luisa, Norma, Susana, and Santiago. This was an interesting discussion and valuable contribution. Certainly very promising for what comes during the next following months. That will be a challenge. So many thanks as well to our amazing audience today. Now we have a deeper understanding of the problems and some practical solutions so we can be part of the economic recovery. So thank you all. I don't know, Carlos, if you want to close the discussion.
Yes. Thank you, Enrique, and thank you everybody for staying until the end. These are all very meaningful contributions from our panel and from Elena. Enrique, thank you for leading the conversation. It's important that my main take is that a lot of these issues that have been very present during the pandemic have issues that have been existing since before. And the whole point is that we take advantage of this period of crisis to really rethink some of these industries, to have tourism that really benefits local communities, to have our creative industries really be in contact with our local craftsmen and local knowledge that will really benefit from this idea that the creative industries will be our industry that connects us with the world. And it's important that as we move forward, that we remain thinking that it's not just about building back to where we were, but maybe building back our industries to a better stand and one that is more equitable and that includes everybody. So thank you very much, everybody. And next week, we'll be having the closing event where we will be having Mark Stevenson, Professor Mark Stevenson from Australia, who is an epidemiologist, urbanist. So very, very well positioned to talk about how epidemics have been propelled urban changes. He's going to give us an introduction. And then after this, we will have a panel with some of the local experts on various industries and various disciplines that will have a more open discussion about what this means to some of the cities where we are currently living. Thank you again, and goodbye to everybody.